We're kind of wandering in as we finish up with lunch. And I'll apologize for any of you that were actually here at 5 after 1 because we were not, but those of you that have been around know that we sometimes are about 10 minutes late. All righty, Robin, go ahead.
Okay. What I have is a short presentation summarizing the budget for this next fiscal year, 18-19. There are quite a few different views of the budget that are included in the item itself, which I'm happy to answer any questions on after we go through the short presentation. So please don't hesitate to ask those kinds of questions. We try to present the information in many different ways to answer questions that have come up over prior budgets. So this will help us know if we've been somewhat successful in that or if there are other views you'd like to have us present.
Absolutely.
Really, the major changes in this budget are the inclusion of a 5-year BCP for investment and some general counsel and procurement staff, really to support a greater transition to internal management. And we worked with the Department of Finance to come up with a way to do that that had some longevity to it, as well as flexibility in terms of the pacing of that transition. So it's presented here as a 5-year BCP to allow for that. You'll also see salary and benefit adjustments that are coming out of the statewide processes. You'll also see some increases in general expense that are related to retiree healthcare. So again, retirement-related items. And then there's an actual reduction in the amount of funding this next fiscal year for the pension solution. So that's reflected in the actual budget. So again, the budget is intended to align with our long-range plans to reduce the investment cost footprint through the transition from external to internal management. Again, we're continuing on our path of educating the entire membership of CalSTRS regarding retirement security. So the transitions that were implemented in 17-18 will continue through 18-19 in terms of changes to service delivery. And then again, you see the continuation of the pension solution project funding in this year, although at a reduced rate. In terms of the current challenges that we face as we present this budget, I do see the improving job market as making our recruitment of staff more challenging. And we are, as you've heard in prior items, experiencing competition for scarce expertise in the building related to the pension solution workload. And then I know, as you're going to hear later today, we're addressing risks associated with the cybersecurity landscape and the ever-evolving tools that those on the dark web have to subject us to attacks. In terms of the context, the way we've tried to present this operational budget is in a frame around the system as a whole. So we talk about overall revenues from investment income, from member employer state contributions. That other income is some revenue we make off of a line of credit. On the expense side, obviously benefit payments is our primary expense, our administrative expenses, and then other expenses, again, is the offset to the income. Those are the fees we pay on a multi-year line of credit. In terms of the administrative expenses, we have presented this year those divided into categories that really align with the priorities: pension and general administration, capital projects, and investment administration. So hopefully that's helped in explaining the differences between the numbers from year to year and what they're being used for. The actual operating budget includes those 3 components. And this year's number is about $277 million. You'll see the increase in pension and general administration is relatively minor as compared to other increases. It really reflects salary and benefit changes. The capital project reduction is, again, a shift in the amount of intended expenditures for the pension solution project this year. And then the internal investment administration increase, that's actually 5 years worth of change. So that's all 58 staff, 55 of which are in investment administration, that we've included in this major BCP. So that's what that reflects. In terms of how the budget looks by branch or operating area, we present that here. Again, the changes are not completely consistent because of differentials in salary increases at the executive level, the investments BCP, the change in the pension solution, the addition of two legal counsel to support investments, but you'll see that the rate overall is a 6% change, even with that significant adjustment in internal investment staff, which should be offset by many times that amount in terms of savings on external investment manager costs.
Thanks, Dana. Thanks for this slide and the additional information I'd requested. I don't think it's for this meeting and certainly not something I would want right away, but perhaps by February, if I could get a breakdown, I don't know if anyone else wants it, within these branches, a little bit additional information as to what's underneath those total costs, the number of employees in each branch.
Okay, so.
Salaries, benefits, et cetera. So it's just additional detail into that.
Okay,
All right? And I don't need it now,
that's fine.
but I would like to have a,
So Harry, we did in the
Is it in here?
appendix.
Yeah.
So I'll point you to TRB, starting on TRB 116. So it shows you there, this is for 16-17, the array that you see above for the comparison between 17-18, 18-19. and then
Robin,
it
which
does
page,
give you
TRB what is it? TRB
116.
116.
And then it does give you the staff count. I will generalize here, and I can certainly get you the detail, but in general, most of the cost in most areas
people.
is people.
Yeah, no, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably, and we could talk offline, I might want a little bit more insight than that pie chart, but
Okay,
that's
that's fine.
Yeah,
That's fine.
and it's not, we don't need to do it here.
Okay,
Thank you, Robin.
no worries, no problem. In terms of the budget change proposal, again, it's a 5-year BCP. The total amount of the request is about $15.5 million. The anticipated value, and again, we'll finalize this before we submit the information to finance for inclusion in the governor's budget, is about $3.3 million. That amount reflects a fairly even distribution of the 58 staff that are included in the BCP. Depending on more recent planning from the investment office, we may need to shift that a bit. Your resolution asks for approval over the whole amount, and we may need to make a few minor adjustments as we close this out before we get it into the governor's budget. But you can see that it includes investment staff and some additional support in procurement and general counsel. This shows the planned increase over the 5 years, so you see a fairly even stair step there. And then the last thing I have in terms of prepared slides is really showing where the changes are from last year to this year. So again, we have a salary increase as a result of bargaining or changes in the salary that the board establishes, the addition of the staff related to the BCP, that same trend carrying into the benefits area. And then in terms of other equipment and operating expenses, it's really a net reduction because the pension solution decrease is offsetting a change in central administration costs, which is really retiree health care. And there is some BCP adjustment as well. As you can imagine, in investments, we have a fairly high anticipated travel budget. So that's really the summary of the change. And then this really summarizes the resolution that we have asked for in terms of the actual amounts for 18-19 in the various areas. The other components here are the ask for the teacher's deferred compensation fund to the extent that revenues are there in terms of cash returns, the ability to internally adjust that budget by 5%. And then this is, again, a typical item where you're authorizing us to use 3% of this 18-19 budget in subsequent years if there are adequate savings to cover that. I will say, as you look at actual results to the budget requests, we continue to run between 10 and 15% surplus, so that 3% is definitely our cap, not the surplus. And most of that has to do with typical turnover, so that when we ask for increases in budget to cover salaries and benefits, we're making those projections based on 100% fill rate, which is not something that we typically experience, but we haven't discounted that. And so then I'll open it up for further questions or discussion.
Don't have anyone here ready to speak. Are there any questions, Robin? This is an action item. I need to entertain a motion to approve.
Move the resolution on TRB 122 and 123.
It's been moved by Harry, seconded by Lynn and Tom. Are there any questions, further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Any abstentions? Robin, they've been approved.
Thank you very much, and Harry, we'll get back to you with the additional
Thank you, Robin.
detail.
All righty. Grant and Joycelyn, come on up.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, or members of the board. I'm going to let Joycelyn do most of the speaking on this item, but I guess I'm here for a little bit of color commentary. And at the start, I just wanted to say, being new to CalSTRS, I really appreciate the process that they have in place for evaluating internal legislative proposals. I've been at other places where there's a lot less rigor than there is here. The proposals you see before you are not all the proposals that were out there. And it's not just members of the governmental relation team, but members of the business area, the exec staff too, who reviews the proposals. And then one thing I did want to mention yesterday during the management letter discussion on the finding about the accuracy of employer reporting, it was mentioned that one of the things we're looking at is working with EDD to see if we can come up with a legislative proposal to get that larger data from employers that we don't currently get. And so that one is not in the packet yet, but we do have meetings, I think even next week, set up with EDD.
We're working on it internally. It's actually a proposal that you saw in a previous year, so you've already approved that as something you would be wanting to sponsor, but we've been wanting to work with the Employment Development Department to make sure that it works for them as well. So we're in the midst of those conversations. Excellent.
All right.
Well, this is item 8. There are 4 legislative proposals. It's an action item, so I'm here to find out whether or not you would like to sponsor these proposals. So I'll go through each one, and I, purview of the committee, but if you want to take action on each separately or look to take that action at the end, let me know. But I'll start with attachment 1. And this has to do with aligning the contribution and reporting due dates. And as you can see in the item, we have several different due dates going on depending on whether it's the defined benefit program or the cash balance benefit program. On the defined benefit side, the money is due 95% on the 5th working day, the remaining balance on the 15th working day. The reports are due on the 44th day. That's calendar day. For the cash balance program, we have everything due on the 10th working day. So as you can see, things are kind of all over the place. On the DB side, those grace periods, I think essentially were to accommodate corrections to contributions and a mailing of reports back when that's what they did. But with advances in payroll systems and with now reports being submitted electronically, we're looking at removing those grace periods. And so the proposal is specifically to have contributions for both programs due on the 6th working day and the reports due on the 20th working day. And that's a switch. It's 45 calendar days right now. And moving it to the 20th working day is akin to moving it to the 30th calendar day. So it sounds like it's maybe even more truncated, but it's about equivalent to the 30th calendar day. And just to point out that on the program side, there's relatively minor opportunity costs estimated between $140,000 and $420,000 by moving it from the 5th to the 6th day for the money on the DB side. And then we're looking at administrative cost savings because of everything being aligned, but also we do have to update our accounting system, and that looks like less than $100,000 is the estimate.
Right. Want to open up for discussion just on this one?
if you would
I
like.
don't have anyone in line yet, so let me ask you this, because I forgot to ask you earlier, Joycelyn. I know we do the client advisory for our constituency groups. We have an employer also?
Correct.
Have you vetted this through that
So
group,
the-
and what are they saying?
The Employer Advisory Committee meets next week, so we will bring it up with them then. We have been meeting with employer groups, and I think for the most part, we're getting feedback that it is doable to make it by these dates. Not much changes between the first of the month and the 6th on the contribution side. And then if we do get feedback, I think we've heard along the way that the 20th working day would also be doable. I know at CAC was that just yesterday? Or 2 days ago? I know they do acknowledge, and we do as well, we're sensitive to it, that there is a lot of complexity in the reporting for our system. So we will remain in contact with those employer groups. We'll see what we hear next week at EAC.
Already, and
I believe Robin also has done some outreach with CASBO and the other business groups.
We're good.
Andy and I have had quite a few encounters across the state related to that. And we started with a much shorter timeline, so the input definitely helped us get to a place, as Joycelyn indicated, where people think it's viable.
Robin, how high a percentage do we have that are making those already?
Most, I don't have those statistics in front of me, but most are here by then.
Okay,
So there are stragglers, but.
alrighty. And Joycelyn, do you want to address the issue about regulations?
Sure. We do have penalties and interest regulations that rely on the due dates. Because this would be a change to law, it supersedes the regulations. We would update our regulations to match, and it goes through a less cumbersome process because we are matching up with the law. But we would take that on if this was to pass.
Are there any questions? Pleasure of the board, because there'll be questions, different questions on each one. Do you want to vote on them now or wait and do them as a slate at the end? If you want to do them now, just move that you approve of sponsoring the legislation. Go ahead, Karen. Go ahead and tap in. There you go. Go ahead.
So our job right now, what you're looking for is to approve this sponsoring legislation, and then you will look for a prospective member to carry it? Okay, so that's the next step after this. So and at this point, I don't know if it's too premature, but do you already have members that you are likely to request?
We generally go to members of the committee or people that have expressed interest in the pension areas. So nobody specific has been identified yet, though.
Entertain a motion to approve? It's been moved by Sharon, seconded by Harry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Abstentions? Okay, we have one abstention. All right, next bill. Or next piece of possible sponsored legislation.
So attachment 2 with the title Annual Billing of Excess Sick Leave. And just to review, in our system, we have a distinction between basic and excess sick leave. And basic sick leave is 1 day of sick leave per pay period. And so it'd be a maximum of 12 days per year. Anything above that amount is considered excess. At the end of a member's career, their sick leave can be converted into service credit, which can be used to calculate their benefit, their retirement benefit when they retire. And as you know, there's a 0.25 contribution rate that employers pay that covers a portion of the basic sick leave. So for excess sick leave, the last employer or employers in that year are responsible for paying for what the effect would be on the benefits. So we get those reports from the employers, and then we calculate how much they would have to pay for any excess sick leave days. Now what happens is, because sick leave gets transferred throughout a member's career if they have different employers, the last employer may not have offered excess sick leave. They may not know that the member had excess sick leave. And so in audits, if we discover that, then we do have to charge for that because the member's benefit was based on that in their service credit amount. So it can be a pretty big bill to the employer depending on how many years have gone by, because there'll be interest involved as well. And so because we found out that that happens quite a bit, then this proposal seeks to have that billing happen each year. So annually, the employer that's offering the excess sick leave would be the one who ends up paying for it. And so it would get reported to us. And this proposal also says it would be effective upon authorization by the board. And the reason that that's there is because we're looking at having this automated in the new pension solution system. So it's probably out a little bit to have that capability where it gets reported and we can bill for it. The amount that we would be billing would take into account excess sick leave that is currently out there, so that has already been granted. That way we don't have to do some strange kind of grandfathering in of the current process and the new process. If you note in attachment 2, the estimated cost for employers would be 0.2 to 0.3% of a member's credible compensation for each day of excess sick leave granted. And that's a cost that is now borne by the last employer, whether or not they granted that excess sick leave. Now it'd be borne by the employer that is offering it, and again, each year. As I mentioned, we're looking at automating this within the pension solution, and we are looking for program cost savings because it would be taken care of at the point that it's given, and then therefore doesn't have to be tracked, and we might be losing out at something at the end of a member's career, and administrative cost savings as well.
Sharon?
So remind me, because I think a lot about sick leave, part-timers deal with sick leave issues, transferring from one district to another. And then this whole idea of your typical sick days, like if you have a 10-month contract, you get 10, 12 months, or D basis is what we call it in our district, you get 12. How does someone get excess sick leave in a year?
It can be granted in the contract. I mean, it would have to be somehow associated with how the district wants to provide that leave.
Can you give me an example of someone, or do you have an example, Harry?
In my limited experience, it's usually management level positions. Traditionally, employees that are in a 10-month position, my experience has been you have a day a month. So if you're working 10 months a year, you have 10 days of sick leave that you can carry over. If you're an 11-month employee, you have 11 months. If you're a 12-month employee, you have 12 months. But in reviewing senior executive contracts at the local level, in my experience, has not been uncommon for those numbers to be different. For example, you can accrue 20 days of sick day leave if you're a 12-month superintendent. It's negotiated between school boards and it's negotiated at the local level, I understand.
Got it.
So I think that's how you would.
Okay, that's helpful. And so we're saying that for a current active teacher or somebody in the counselor system, that we would be kind of prepaying. So every year, like I'm 40-something, it's my 5th year, we'd prepay for whatever excess sick days are for that year, that district that they're currently employed in would prepay for that.
Right.
And then if they move to another district, if there was excess sick leave, then it would be the.
Correct. And in the law, it requires that, so kind of you're starting to think about the math a little bit, that basic sick leave be used first. So that if there is excess sick leave existing at the end of the career currently, that gets paid for at the end. So in case you're wondering, like, is it basic?
There's something, I know some of the older members in our district, wasn't there something strange with like excess sick leave and people not being able to use it? I don't know. I've heard from, maybe
I'm
I'm
not
just
familiar with that
extrapolating
situation, but
cases I've heard of where, so they use the regular, I thought though when you retire, if you have, let's say, 100 basic sick days and I've got 75 excess sick days and I have a 175-day contract, I get a year's worth of service credit, right?
You still get the same
Okay.
equivalent service
So
credit. Like you just
regardless of the type of sick days.
mentioned. Right. It's just how does it get paid for?
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Is the difference.
Seems like it makes a lot of sense. Okay, thank you.
Harry, did you want to get back in line?
No.
So Joycelyn, when you were starting your comments, you'd said if a member that was employed in a district that granted excess sick leave, but then went to a district that did not grant it, the district that did not grant it would still have to pay for it.
Currently.
But if they have no visibility of it, how do we have visibility of it?
We end up finding it in audits, which is why it's so difficult, because it can be very much after
If we had
the
audited the
fact.
previous district?
If we audit the district that they retired from, because we'll look at
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
How do we know that member has excess sick leave if the final employer doesn't report it?
Well, I think that in looking at if someone from audits wants to come up and clarify for sure, but I think in looking at the random sample of members, they would look for sick leave reporting. I think that's one of the biggest issues that the auditors look for. And they would see, does it look like this is equivalent, and they dig into it a bit more and then, try to discover where did the excess come from? Is there excess here? But that's the complication as well, is that sometimes it's not tracked. And I think that probably is a difficult job for our auditors, but I know they keep an eye out for it.
Okay, so what I think I'm gonna ask is that we take a look at that. Andrew, would that be your shop that would take a look at sick leave?
Combination.
Okay, so,
Financial services.
okay, so, for me, what the issue is, not so much excess sick leave, but it kind of dovetails into this because it's the reporting of it. And when that leave gets reported. Right now, going back to basic sick leave, if you have sick leave and for some reason you leave the district that you're employed in, that you've earned that sick leave, you go to another district, and by law, if you do that within a certain time period, the new district is required to take those days. If a certain amount of time goes by, they're not. And so during the financial downturn, we had a bunch of members that were laid off, took jobs elsewhere, came back to education, and then had lost all their sick leave. So say, I'm a 20-year teacher, I've never been sick, I have 200 days of sick leave. I get laid off because we did have 20-year veterans that were getting laid off during that time period. I go to work for whatever entity, and 3 years down the road, I come back to a school. I've lost all 200 days.
Right.
And that is being paid for through the extra contributions that employers are contributing, but our members are losing them. And so I'd like us to explore if there's a way that we can somehow capture that so that our members aren't losing out on it.
So I'm not going to speak to the legal framework, but I am going to speak to the intended changes in employer reporting under pension solution. So part of what we're trying to accomplish is to get a hire and a termination record or an exit record. And as a part of the exit record, we are asking for remaining. Right, so we would have that balance, so that this legal change is intended to address one part of the problem, but there are actual process changes that are intended to address some other problems. Now, that wouldn't change whatever the legal limit is, but at least there would be visibility into the number of days that had been accrued. In terms of the prior question on the audit, some of it has to do with the member's expectation as to how many sick leave days they should be receiving credit for. Right. And what that does in terms of the number of days that would have had to have been awarded and how that reporting is coming in versus what we're seeing in the actual reporting of sick leave at the end, at retirement. Right. So there are various ways for us to detect the problem. Right.
With this excess stuff.
Right.
All right, can we, Madam Chair of Benefits and Services,
Yes.
can we keep that on?
Absolutely.
Not add it to our work plan for this year, but let's at least keep it in our mind going forward. If there's a way that we can prevent that loss, that would be huge for a lot of members if we find ourselves in a nasty situation again. Or if they take maternity leave for, an extended period of time. I mean, there's lots of reasons why that can happen. All right, Sharon?
Well, it happens for part-timers too,
Yeah.
where they work in like 5 different districts in the LA area, and they move to Northern California, and they don't realize they can take that they should request their sick leave to follow them. And then they lose track, as we all do with those details. And so what is What is the legal time period that people have to transfer sick leave? Do we know?
My understanding from my staff just pulled the statutes before I came downstairs is that for K through 12, the employee has to be continuously employed. So you have to go to work for another district that next year or within the same year. And then on the community college side, it's within 3 school years. And I think that change is more recent. I think it maybe used to be more akin to K through 12.
We will definitely pull this into benefits and services, because to me, it really is an issue where we're seeing, whether it's the part-timers or folks like you're talking about in the K through 12, where we track sick leave basically on our district's payroll system. Is that accurate? So you're counting on districts, SAP or whatever they use for payroll to track their sick days, right?
Right. Yep.
And that, yeah, that's.
And we do hear from employers that there's a problem with that, because they may not have visibility in the
Right.
transition. So I think it's both parties would be helped by the transparency at Access and Title.
What I hear when we talk about how sick leave converts to service credit is, oh yeah, I went back to Santa Monica College 10 years later and they said they don't have a record of my sick leave, which, again, the faculty should have kept track too, or shoulda, woulda, coulda. There's lots of issues with that. So we'll definitely talk about that in benefits and
All right.
services, so thanks.
Thank you.
But to this particular law, I think we should
Yep.
do it.
Now I just need a motion.
I move, what?
Approval
Moving
of the
approval?
sponsorship.
Move
Move approval of
approval of
sponsorship.
the sponsorship of this legislation.
It's been moved and seconded, moved by Sharon, seconded by Karen. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? And we have one abstention. All righty. Moving right along.
Sure.
Thank you, Joycelyn, for being prepared for that.
Definitely.
know.
Thank you to my staff. Attachment 3 is about electronic payments. So currently, employers can submit contributions either by paper check or through electronic funds transfer. And of course, inherent in paper checks are some risks such as fraud or them getting lost in the mail and things like that. So this proposal is to require employers to use electronic funds transfers to get their contributions to us, which aligns us with best practices. It gains administrative efficiencies, and of course, it takes care of some of those risks we see with that with paper checks. The proposal is to have it effective upon authorization by the board. It gives us time to make sure employers are ready to go. For example, CalPERS had a bill some years ago to do the same thing, and they went into full implementation in July. And so they took some time before they actually pulled the trigger. So it'll be up to the board, decision as to when to do that. We are also looking to provide a waiver, which CalPERS does in case a district does have a reason why they cannot do electronic funds transfer. And because of the administrative efficiencies I mentioned, we do think that there will be savings. It does cost more to process paper checks than it does electronic funds transfers, so it's approximately $96,000 a year.
So it sounds, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Sharon has moved, and Karen and Tom again have seconded. So, Joycelyn, it sounded to me like you needed to hear from us when we wanted it to take effect, and also whether we wanted to provide for a waiver.
I think the waiver would be included as part of the legislation, and that essentially the implementation date would be decided by the board.
You need that from us now?
No,
No, you just
No.
pull the trigger later if the bill passes.
right.
So
Okay.
instead of putting an
A
effective
a
date,
date
you decide.
within the bill.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure we were.
And it also gives us a chance to see how the CalPERS implementation goes, since we're really piggybacking their,
Oh, they just started
they're
this
plowing
July.
that, and
Got
we
got
can
it.
You can learn from that.
do that, yeah.
And Robin, and Andrew, was that something you were speaking with administrators with, business offices and things like that? Was that also part of that conversation? I'm sorry, you didn't need,
No,
okay.
I thought, well, I'm not being fair to the people who are listening. This is actually coming out of, as Joycelyn indicated, check handling is risky. And it also dovetails in with a need from our banking partner at the treasurer's office in terms of how float works. So those are the primary drivers on this. We know from the CalPERS implementation that there are, and it's really the county treasurers that are likely to be concerned about it because the offset to the float on the state side is the float on the county side. And so that's why the exception process is there and why we have some hesitancy in terms of the effective date, because we want to make sure that we do acknowledge the trade-off that this is representing.
All right. Entertain a motion to sponsor?
So moved.
Already do that?
Because I think it was
So we
like,
did.
Oh, we did, never
Thought we
mind.
did it already.
ready for a vote.
I
Good thing
moved
you
it,
caught me
Tom
before
seconded.
Steve had to say something.
Yeah, I was
All
gonna
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All righty. On to the next one. Harry can move this one. How's that?
Okay, and then the last one, attachment 4. This has to do with post-retirement option changes. As you're probably familiar, a member who's eligible to retire at retirement can elect an option, which means that they will get a benefit themselves for their lifetime, and they provide a benefit to someone else, their beneficiary, their option beneficiary for that person's lifetime. You can elect multiple option beneficiaries as well. Once you are in retirement, there are very limited reasons you can change your option, and they're outlined in the item. There's 4 of them. And the one I'm going to focus on today, because it interacts with it, is that once a member gets divorced in retirement, depending on the settlement agreement and what that requires of them, if they have to choose their ex-spouse as an option or something like that. But basically, they can elect to go on with a member-only benefit if their option beneficiary was their ex-spouse and that's canceled. They can pick a member-only benefit and go forward with that, or they can pick a new option beneficiary. Whatever they choose, that's set at the time that the divorce happens and that original option is canceled. What can happen is that person may later get married down the road, but at that point in time, if they chose the member-only option, they can't elect their new spouse. So what this proposal seeks to do is allow that member to elect their new spouse down the line. And it seems sensical, and it would be, minor and absorbable administrative cost savings. We've had members, speak to us about this and say, I am now married and why is this not available to me? So it's something we want to take care of.
The only thing I would add to that is that currently if a member goes into retirement not married and then they get married, they can choose somebody as a spouse and add them as an option. So I think we see it as an equity issue.
Right. And I would say that you can see in the item that some of these have, these changes in post-retirement have waiting periods, and that's due to adverse selection. So if there's something that would take advantage of the plan, so it would cost us more, we try to avoid that with the waiting period. So another piece of this proposal would be to require that the marriage have been in place for a year and that there be a 12-month waiting period before the option becomes effective.
All right, any questions? Entertain a motion to sponsor?
So moved.
Harry has moved.
I have a question too.
Okay. I'm waiting for a second.
Second.
All righty. We have a second with Sharon. Go ahead, Harry.
My assumption is that marriage is the definition of marriage, and it's domestic partnerships as well, right? I mean,
It does not include domestic partnerships.
doesn't?
It does not.
Why?
Because they are defined differently. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me see if I'm misspeaking, if someone can help me. But I think what I'm thinking about is the federal laws of the age limits that Dana was talking to me earlier. So
And I wasn't going to ask it because I didn't
Yeah.
want to complicate things.
So-
I just wanted the answer somewhere down the line. Go ahead.
So if there is a piece of the option selection process where your non-spouse option beneficiary has to be within a certain number of years. So that non-spouse, that term also reflects domestic partners, so they have to be within the timeframes. But actually, when these choices are made after retirement, I know we generally treat domestic partners the same as spouses.
Okay, so I don't want to complicate the issue. So I don't want this change not to take place and for us not to pursue this because of this matter. But it's something I would like for us to,
Get the answer for you, yes.
yeah, follow up on
Yep.
at some point. So,
The you'll be seeing these proposals as they move along.
Yeah, great, yeah, terrific. So let's move forward with this today and then,
So Harry, is your goal to, if the person that retires and then enters into domestic partnership, would you want this to mirror it also? As long as it
absolutely,
applies with the law, as the law says?
absolutely. So
Okay.
who you marry, who you love, doesn't matter.
There you go. So,
It does include domestic partnership.
Thank you.
okay,
There we go. Thanks.
all right, so we've got it. Thank you, Rena. So we will make
Everybody's
sure that
calling
we
a friend
clean that.
today, apparently.
All righty. And was that friendly to whoever the seconder was?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're good. All in favor, say aye. All
Aye.
opposed, nay. Any abstentions? All righty,
Thank you very much.
thank you. Anything else? So I have state and federal legislative update by me. I don't have anything to update anybody with. Does anybody want to say anything about state or federal?
The updates I have are that our technical housekeeping bill was signed, so that'll go into effect January 1st. In addition, AB 20 by Assemblymember Calra requiring reporting on our engagement with companies involved with the Dakota Access Pipeline was also signed. So that report is required by April 1st of 2018.
Yeah, it was consent, anyway, yeah.
Okay, and
Oh,
then.
I'm sorry, jump to 11.
Yes,
Yeah.
so this is a consent item.
You skipped
No
over
wonder why I don't have it.
CEO report.
Yeah, we had 9 and
Don't
10
take it
before
personal,
that,
John.
yeah.
Seeing that Joycelyn's already started, can we go ahead and have her finish? We'll be done with legislation?
Yeah, we just had a consent in case you want, but if you've got any questions for, her, yeah.
Okay, so if you can go to, what page is it in our,
TRB 161 is the start of the matrix.
so if you have any questions there, go ahead, Joycelyn, I apologize.
Yeah, so those are the two bills that were chaptered this year, so we'll be implementing those. Some updates on two-year bills. AB 946, it's the border divestment from companies involved with the border wall. The author is still looking at that bill and has some ideas on amendments along the lines of making it prospective. AB 1597, the Turkish divestment bill, I believe the author is open to conversations to not have that be a divestment bill, but we'll have to get more details. And some of the other bills, the author's offices are still deciding what to do, including AB 1451 regarding the post-retirement earnings limit and the teachers shortage. SB 560, Senator Allen's bill dealing with reporting on sustainability, and then SB 571, Senator Pan's bill on auto enrollment. So authors are still determining what to do. If those bills have not moved to the second house, the authors have until the end of January to get those moving, whether they're going to do amendments or move them as is. Thank you.
So before we go into your report, Jack, all the board knows, but I'm not so sure that all our audience knows, but we have two of our board members leaving us, and we would just like to take this opportunity to say thank you for their service and everything they've brought to the board. So, Arena, thank you. Congratulations on the new job. And Tom, thank you too. Everything you've brought to the board, your wisdom and your wit, and congratulations on actually retiring in retirement.
Well, thank you. It's been both an honor and a pleasure to serve. And I have to say that over the last year, every time I've looked at Kelsters, the R got larger and larger. And I thought, I finally realized it was telling me something, so I have to start working on my retirement.
And you don't have to say anything if you don't want to.
Thank you to everybody who's been so great. It's been a great experience with the board, the staff. It's a absolutely great organization. Was very, very happy to learn from all of you and participate in it for 4 years, so.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, one more round. All right, Jack.
Well, that board cultural piece you talked about earlier is playing itself out because you've both been strong voices in shaping what we've been doing here these last years. So again, thank you very much for what you've done for us. On my report, I was just going to emphasize a couple points about the study that I highlighted for you from the National Institute on Retirement Security. You know, several times in these last 3 days now, you've said we have a belief that this is a better system for teacher retirement, and I think we all share that value and perspective here. But I want to underscore how important that study was that we commissioned in 2016 with the University of California, Berkeley, to really put data behind the question, does a system like CalSTRS really, at the end of the day, provide a better retirement for teachers, given changes in mobility patterns, changes in turnover, attrition, all those things. And that study really received great play in 2016. I just got an email a couple hours ago that study of ours is now going to appear as a journal article in the Journal of Retirement.
Wow.
That's just coming out this month, as now it has a more formalized study approach. Remember, it was authored by Nari Ree of Berkeley and then Flick Fornia, who's a professional actuary out of Denver. Also, at recent discussions at the NCTR, there's interest of other states of potentially replicating that same methodology and approach to looking at other teacher systems. So married to some of the things that NIRS is doing, I think it really helps what we're doing to not just say we believe this is a better system, but really have to sound academic research to document this, because the critics of these systems don't have that. They have ideological perspectives that are based on generalizations of data. And what we've done here really is put really a record in place. So I'm real proud of the work CalSTRS has done, and I'm glad to see that we'll see it pushed around in other states as well to kind of make the case. So I just want to make sure you all see where that's going. And then I just asked Cassandra just to do a little amplification of the next section. Again, you heard from your speaker in the governance committee the importance of bench strength as part of any strength of an organization and succession. And then you asked me at our offsite, again, what are some of the details behind the leadership training that we're doing? And we highlighted for that in writing for you. And then Cassandra was going to say a few words about it as well.
Thank you. I am excited to share and highlight some of the activities that we've done here at CalSTRS. As if you remember yesterday, the presenter commented that leadership development in organizations has really become more sophisticated. And even with respect to that, I think that CalSTRS is a leader in the public sector in developing leadership development and staff development in the organization. If you remember, we had, a few years ago, we had prepared a curriculum for an executive development program that we had a cohort of applicants participate in. And that development program was highly successful. I think we had approximately 50% of those participants achieve senior leader level positions or executive level positions, either at CalSTRS or in other organizations. And from that point, we've developed a number of other cohort activities in the educational realm that I wanted to share with you. The one that we have just kicked off is the Master Series program, which is again a cohort program with participants that participate in networking activities, workshop activities, experiential learning activities. That program is highly successful and it's been well received in the organization. We've had Dana and Sharon participate in a panel discussion with that cohort that tried to give a perspective from the board member trustee perspective on what staff need to be prepared for when they're working with boards. Another program that we've recently developed with our investment staff is the Investment Leadership Program called Aspire, and that's being championed by Chris Ellman and Michelle Cunningham and Deborah Smith. And it's also an 18-month cohort participation that uses the same methodology as the Master Series and is an investment-focused cohort. Other development programs that we have in the organization are leadership forums that we have quarterly that have a number of different topics that we introduce to the leadership staff. And then we also have manager academies that have a deep dive into a number of different content relative to management, emotional intelligence, a number of different things for them to help them through their career. And then we also have a whole host of development courses that are provided to all levels of staff throughout the organization. We highlight these annually through a learning expo that is very well received so that staff recognize all the different opportunities. We really take pride in developing staff in the organization, and we share this with them as they're coming on. We want, from our view, and particularly from, I can speak for myself, I really want staff to feel as though that they can achieve their full career potential. And it's more than just an aspirational comment. It's whether or not we can give them the tools to achieve that. And if we can do that and they can have that long career here, then that's a win-win for all of us. If they achieve that somewhere else, that's okay, but it's really developing them to meet their full potential and goals in their career. So we're really proud of what we have done. Our HR staff and organizational development have done an outstanding job under the guidance of Melissa Norsha and their executive sponsor for all these programs, Lisa Blatnick. So I just want to give them kudos, so thank you.
All right, anything else, Chuck? Super. Now I got to go back to my agenda. All righty, it's Lamont going to talk about the enterprise contract provisions.
Although I am probably grossly underqualified, I'm going to try to fill in for Lamont. He's
Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. He's otherwise occupied. This item was put on the agenda to address the treasurer's request to extend the applicability of the responsible contractor policy. However, you dealt with that in item 2 in investments, and the only thing I would add to that, I believe that PCA was directed to follow up on that, and
Correct.
Our legal department will support them in that effort.
All righty, good enough. All righty, consent agenda. Already took you through one item. We do have 12F that's been pulled. We have A through I. Is there anyone else that wants to pull any of the other consent items on that agenda? Harry?
Dan, I don't want to pull anything. I'm trying to coordinate my personal calendar. There may be an education opportunity that comes up between now and our next February meeting. So I'll go through the chair and Jack to put in that request. And if I'm able to clear my calendar, you'll get a request.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, I have the same issue too. So.
Okay, so be prepared. We might be sending a couple more people to a couple more places. You do have a updated copy of our educational item that is part of this consent agenda. Any other polls or comments? Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Harry has moved it.
Second.
Paula or Karen have seconded it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Any abstentions? All righty, moving on. So Steve, items referred by the, 12F, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Paul, do you want, this is the Enterprise Risk Management Report. Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, I asked that this be pulled because I wanted to ask a few questions about the heat maps on 181 and understand a little bit better how the determination was made as to the placement of the 9 different risk areas on the heat map. And I have some thoughts, but maybe let's start before I offer my thoughts and hear from staff how.
I appreciate if you highlight that for us so we can think about that.
Okay.
So I'm very glad that you asked the question. Obviously, the communication was effective in engendering thoughts regarding it, so I appreciate that. What we were trying to do here was to distinguish in presenting the heat map in 2 ways, the difference between the inherent risk and where we feel we are from the frame of a point in time in September. This happens to reflect September 2017 results because of the mitigation work that we've been doing. So basically, the The first heat map is absent any intervention from management or staff in terms of mitigation. This is where we think we are in terms of risk. And then the residual risk relates to, based on the fact that we have these mitigation activities, what do we think our risk is at this point? So that's the definition. The actual formula is to take the probability plus the velocity. So again, this isn't visible to you, and that's one of the things that we can help from a presentation perspective, times the impact. And so that's how we get to a number. And then looking at the various numbers, we reconcile that with really our impression as an executive staff as to where we are. So again, standing from the frame of, this is the documentation we have around mitigation activities, this is where the inherent risk was, this is where, at this point in time, we feel we are as an organization in looking at this risk. So again, it's a frame at a point in time. Velocity in our definitions really is rather immediate. So it's talking about a matter of months versus something over a year. So this frame of reference, and again, this may be something that we want to think about and determine if it's effective, is really a year or less. So it's really talking about the risk from that view. So it's not the risk over 30 years, for example. It really is the risk as we look at where we sit in terms of preparation right now. And again, a catastrophic risk, as we've defined it, is catastrophic to the organization as a whole. So it would cause a going concern kind of dilemma, is what that is intended to demonstrate. So that's the process that we're using and how we got to the heat maps that you see in the item.
David, Deborah, have anything to add, or I'm happy to ask some questions?
No, probably the only thing I would add, again, just to add to what Robin said, a lot has to do with the methodology that went into this, especially when you look at velocity. When we look at some of the funding risk, we consider them more long-term, which is why they ended up maybe with with a lower score on the chart there. They have a great impact, but it's something we're going to see over the long term. And the other reason why some of them are lower, especially on the residual risk, is we made an attempt to reflect the decision the board made last year to adopt new actual assumptions. So we believe, at least from a perspective, are our actual assumptions adequate? What's the risk related to this? We are in a much better place today than we were a year ago. So that's the reflection we made also in the heat map, which is why you see some of these risks on the decrease.
And just to add to what David mentioned, and Robin as well, we're pretty confident in our mitigation controls and factors. What we looked at when looking at this risk score is that the things that we can't control. And so that's why we rated them the way that we did.
So it seems to me that the things that we can't control are in fact the things that are rated as low risk, because what we can't control is what investment returns are going to be. We can't control that. We can try to mitigate, and we have, RMS and however we decide our asset allocation is, and that's to try to address risk. But we can't control that, and the same way we can't control actuarial risk. We don't know whether people are going to live longer or not. There's all sorts of things that we don't know. What we can control, though, is the management of the organization. So things like a lot of these issues are under our control if we manage well, which I think, I think this board feels that this organization is managed well, and so I actually have more confidence in this organization's ability to manage the risks that are under our control through good management, because I think we have good management. Whereas I think, things like actuarial and investment risk are things we can't control. I understand that if we're looking at only a one-year period of time, that it's true that the organization isn't at serious risk because of 1 year of investment experience or 1 year of actuarial results turning out to be a little bit different than we anticipated. But we're not a one-year organization. I mean, I'm assuming that the whole point of this ERM exercise is to identify where we focus our efforts to mitigate risk. And what's important really is long-term risks are just as important, if not more important, than short-term risks. So the worry that I have in this, because I wouldn't question it if we're only looking at a one-year period of time. The worry I have, though, is that it focuses our attention too much then on short-term matters, because it says, here's the risks that we have, and we need to focus on those risks, and if all we do is look at short-term risks, then we're going to focus our attention on short-term risks. And we spent, a long time with David this morning talking about risks that are serious. They're longer-term risks, but they're serious, and I think that this approach kind of takes us away from focusing on what I think were the issues that came up this morning, which is we need to think about these long-term risks. We need to think about how we might be able to respond to them before they, get really bad, whether it's through going to the legislature and suggesting changes in the funding formula to give us more authority, or something we didn't talk about this morning, but which would do something more immediately, which is, if the funding risk report talked about how if we didn't earn 7%, but we earned 6 3/4%, we would there might be a higher contribution from the state, but we would still reach full funding. Well, that's under our control. We could change the risk profile of our investment portfolio. We could take some risk off of the table by adopting a less risky investment portfolio. So I don't question the legitimacy of this evaluation in the short run, but I would hope that a risk report and our looking at risk as an organization would go beyond just 1 year, and that we would also look at it long term.
And we really appreciate the feedback, Paul, and I think, that's something we discussed as an executive staff in September, and your questions and comments have emphasized the need to step back and say, is this the right frame of reference, or maybe we have multiple frames of reference? So that's another solution would be to have both a short term, which I think is important, as well as a longer term frame of reference. And so there would be a way to get both of those views in front of you and us from a management perspective. Part of this, in terms of the short term frame, things become actionable through the management of the organization. So we want to make sure that we're addressing those kinds of things as well. So that's great.
Good.
All righty.
Good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Entertain a motion to approve the report then.
So moved.
Right, it's been moved by Paul and seconded by Harry. Is that good?
Yep.
All righty. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed nay. Any abstentions? All right, we are through our consent. Thank you, Paul. Steve, did we have any items referred by committee for board decision? We talked about the sick leave stuff going to benefits and services, but that's the only thing I can remember. Okay. No new business. Review for information requests. Any?
So, Madam Chair, I picked up one on item 3.
Oh, good. Good job.
Which was a request for information concerning the distinction between those states who mandate their charter schools
That's right. There
be
we
a
go.
part of the state-sponsored pension system and those that don't, and sort of the underlying reasons behind that.
Okay, super. Some more information on the charter school stuff.
Wasn't there something about benefits and services and looking at
Sick leave.
sick leave?
Yeah, we got that one.
Oh, we got that one?
Yeah, that one I did remember. Go ahead, Robin.
I think Harry had a request for the more additional detail on the branch by branch breakdown.
There you go, numbers of staff and stuff.
So item A, 12A is your committee reports.
We blew right through it. We've got action items on those. Paul, can
And
you?
I would highlight for you, I'm sorry, the ARM committee report, which is, it is referring approval of the,
Yeah, we have 4 items to
Code of
move in there.
conduct, yeah.
4
I
action
just-
items. Yeah, and there's something from comp too.
Right.
I just blew right by that. So Paul, if you can plug in again, you have 4 items coming out of ARM.
Yes. Okay. By direction of the Audit and Risk Management Committee, I move to adopt, one, the independent auditor's report on CalSTRS financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2017. Two, the report to those charged with governance, and three, the independent auditor's report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance and other matters.
Paul, would you like to do each one of these separately, or do you want to do all four at once? Your pleasure as chair, how's that? Do them all at once?
Yeah, let's do them all at once.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't think there's going to be any. The second one is, by direction of the committee, I move to adopt the proposed resolution on the independent auditor's report on CalSTRS financial statement for the year ended June 30th, 2017. By the direction of the committee, I move to adopt the 2018 internal audit plan. By direction of the committee, I move to adopt the Code of Business Ethics and Business Conduct.
So everyone should have that before them. All other matters that went through these committees are written and are going to be added to the record. We need to take action on these. So Paul is moved as chair of the committee. Is there any question or further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed nay. Any abstentions? Alrighty, Comp Committee. By direction of the Compensation Committee, I move to adopt revisions to the non-U.S. equity benchmark definition within the administrative procedures for the Teachers Retirement Board Compensation Policy, Section 700, as recommended by Pension Consulting Alliance, PCA, and set forth on Comp 15, page 15 through 18. By direction of the Compensation Committee, I move to delay the comprehensive incentive plan evaluation pending completion of the investment business model project study in investments and consider evaluating investment officer 2 incentive opportunities as further detailed on Comp 24. Are there any questions or any further discussions on those? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed nay. Any abstentions? Thank you very much, Brian. I'm concerned about time, and I probably shouldn't have played speed up rules quite so early. Okay, draft agenda, Jack?
We've got the federal presentation by John Stanton. It's been a while since he's been here, so given what might happen by December or January, and tax reform and other issues, this could be a very worthy session with John. We've got our charter school project piece coming back. We talked a lot this morning about what we're going to discuss around the pension solution project. And then I think item 9 particularly is another very important research piece around the retirement readiness study that we do periodically for you. I think that's going to be a great interest to our stakeholder community. So that's the highlights of it. I think I haven't timed all the things out. It looks like it might be a tad more succinct, those February meetings. This has been a long 3 days. All the committees had long, hearty agendas. I think it's a little leaner, a little bit. We'll see. No, that was, we haven't had a board book this long in quite a while, actually. When we got, getting back up to 1,000 pages it's scary. Yeah, we were getting back to the 500-600 page level. This was a tough one for all of us to write and for you to read, for sure. And I thought, given the time, we'll bring I want to make sure you saw that. We'll bring a calendar for 18-19 to you, meeting calendar, so that you can get your calendars straight for the following year. So we'll have that on the agenda. I'll work with you, Dana, to get dates picked and all that stuff.
All right. Anything else on the agenda? Harry? Wow, my thing went really small all of a sudden.
If you think it's appropriate, we increased the release time for the 3 elected teachers this year from a percentage up to 60%. And there was some discussion when the committee, our colleagues, approved that if it's appropriate, maybe we can give an update as to how that's working so far this year in February, when you and Jack are working on the agenda. Sure. And if it's appropriate and the time permitting, it might be good to give a status report as to how that's working.
All right.
And I know that we've been providing some information for the staff
to Brian and his staff.
Yeah, how we're monitoring that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Go ahead, Brian.
One last thing, it really is an information request. I know that I mentioned to you that the education code, there's a statute that allows the board to authorize mortgage. Right.
Yeah,
So
in your report, that's best done in open session, I agree.
Yeah. There's a statute that allows the board to establish a home loan program in the event that members are affected by a natural disaster in an area that's been declared an emergency by the governor. So one of the things we talked about was looking at that statute with regards to teachers, members who were affected by these terrible fires. So we did an initial review, and I just wanted to tell you some of the hurdles.
Please.
So it's a good thought, but there are quite a few legal hurdles. So first, of course, it would require an analysis and a presentation by your fiduciary counsel or someone else to advise it's within your fiduciary duty, or it's appropriate as fiduciaries to do that, because that's in the statute itself. And then the other was, looking at the value proposition. What are we really talking about? We're talking about people who are not covered by any insurance, including federal insurance. And then we'd have to really look for a loan servicer. And if you remember in the home loan program, we've had so much difficulty obtaining a loan servicer and keeping a loan servicer. And there is very little, if any, money to be made for a loan servicer here. So it would really almost be like an altruistic process. So there are very significant hurdles, and just my conversations with Lamont and some of our fine folks in investments, I'm happy to research it and bring it back as an item, but I would tell you that I don't hold out any hope for actually being able to do it.
To even if we cleared the first couple of
Even
hurdles.
if we cleared some of the legal
finding
hurdles,
the servicer to
actually
do it.
pragmatically finding a servicer would just seems to be
I think you're absolutely right.
impossible.
But Brian, I really appreciate you taking a look at that. We know that we have several members that lost homes in that fire, and it was a good idea.
Well,
Just-
hopefully they'll have insurance coverage.
Keeping my fingers crossed. All righty. So opportunity for statements from the public, please. Seeing none, we will declare the open session of the board recessed, and we will be going into open session closed session in 10 minutes. Closed session, 10 minutes.